All right, so today we are going to be graphing the tangent function. So we want to start again, just like we did with our sine and cosine, with a little, with our unit circle, right? Now the tangent one's a little different than the sine and cosine. If we look at our unit circle, okay, let's say this is pi over 4. This would be 2 pi over 4, which is just pi over 2, right? And then next we'd have 3 pi over 2. And then we would have pi. And the same going this way, it just would be negative. So negative pi over 4, negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 2, and negative pi. Okay, so we need to figure out what this is 1 and this is negative 1. So what is the tangent of 0? So this point right here is what? 1, 0? And remember the tangent is sine over cosine? Or we could just say that, remember, the tangent of theta is just equal to y over x. So what is the tangent of 0? Would be sine, which is 0 over 1, and 0 over 1 is what? 0. So it's just this point here, correct? Okay, pi over 4, guys, pi over 4 is right here at the 45 degrees, right? And what are the coordinates here? Right. So what's the tangent of pi over 4? It's just 1. Do y'all see why it's 1? It's the square root of 2 over the square root of 2 over 2, which is just 1. So pi over 4 is just 1. Okay? What about the tangent of pi halves? That's a 0. The tangent of pi over 2 is undefined, right? Because that would just be the sine, which is 1, over the cosine, which is 0. So this is undefined. Do y'all remember what we do with undefined values on our graphs? A vertical asymptote. Very good. Okay, so at pi over 2, we're going to have a vertical asymptote. Did somebody just say my name? No? Okay. Now we're going to go back this way. What is the tangent of pi over negative pi over 4?
Wait, why are we going the opposite way?
This is, I want to kind of show you what the tangent graph looks like. But yeah, because it's undefined, so we can't go anymore. You'll see it actually starts over and repeats itself, but right now I just want to finish at least one graph. So what's the tangent of negative pi over 4? That would be here, right? Because this is negative 45 degrees. So what are the coordinates here at negative 45 degrees, which would be? Right. So our sine would be negative square root of 2 over 2 divided by the square root of 2 over 2, which is just what? Negative 1. So at pi over 4, we get negative 1. Do y'all see that point? I'm kind of having to write over it. Okay, and guess what the tangent of negative pi halves is? Undefined, right? So we're going to have a vertical asymptote there. Okay, so our graph kind of looks like this. Okay? Now, this is going to be repeated every time. It would just continue going on. But I'm only going to make you do one graph. Does that make sense? It would be like an asymptote, the graph, an asymptote, the graph. I'm only going to make you do one. Okay? Is that cool? Yeah. You'll see soon that it's very easy. When you look at the graph, it doesn't look easy, but I promise you as soon as we start working these, you're going to be like, oh, piece of cake. Okay? All right, so this is the standard form. I just wanted to kind of show you what it looks like and how the graph of this is related to the point of this is showing you how the graph of the y equals the tangent of theta is related to the unit circle. Okay? Now let's actually start graphing these. So the amplitude is just the absolute value of a again, which is the same. The only thing different about the tangent of graph is the period. Remember for sine and cosine, the period is 2 pi over b, but for tangent, it's just pi over b. Okay? So on number 1, the amplitude is just what? 1. And the period, instead of it being 2 pi over b, is just pi over b, so that would be pi over 2. The only other thing we want to find are asymptotes, which is x equals plus or minus pi divided by 2 times b. And what's b? 2. So x equals plus or minus pi over 4. Which, the only thing I'm really going to make you graph is your graph and your asymptotes, okay? Because all you have to graph is your asymptotes, really. So this is pi over 4, but then we also need negative pi over 4. Okay? But these are our asymptotes. Okay, so this is 1, negative 1. There we go. We're done. Is it always going to be like that? Yes, unless, guess what? It's negative. And then it's going to be the other way. Yes, you have to draw your asymptotes. I'm sorry that that came out harshly. Please draw your asymptotes. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's go to number 2. On number 2, what is our amplitude? 1? Good. And the period is just pi over b, which in this case b is 1, so the period is just pi. And our asymptotes are just what? Plus or minus pi divided by 2, which is just pi half, right? Good. Right, so it's going to go this way. How do you feel about this? Seth, do you see what I was talking about now? You do believe that they're easier now? Okay. The reason it makes sense, the period, guys, if you look at number 1, it says, what's the period of 1 full cycle? And we're saying that the period is pi over 2, right? Right. Because from here to here is pi halves, right? This is pi over 4, and then 2 pi over 4, which is pi halves, right? From here to here is half a pi, and this is half a pi, which means the period of this tangent graph is pi. Does that make sense? From here to here is pi, which is the period. Remember the period's how long it is? But over here, from here to here is pi halves, which is our period. Do y'all see that relationship? No. This is the last thing we're learning too, okay? Your test is on Tuesday. All right, so number 3. On number 3, the amplitude is 1, right? And the period is pi over b. And here, what is b? 1/2, right? So then we'd flip it and multiply. So this is just equal to pi times the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2 over 1. So that's 2 pi.
Now what do you do with
To find our asymptotes, they're just equal to x equals plus or minus pi over 2 times 1/2, right? And 2 times 1/2 is just 1. So that's x equals plus or minus pi. Some of you may see this easier. Let me show you this. Once we find our period, the asymptotes are just half of that. Okay? So here our period is pi over 2, and half of that is pi over 4. Here our period is pi, and half of pi is pi halves. Here our period is 2 pi, so if you just think about what's half of 2 pi, pi. Does that make sense? Any questions? Do you want to do another one? Or are you feeling good about this? Feeling good? You want to do 4? Okay. 4, the amplitude is, oh, and I'm sorry, I've been forgetting to label this as 1 and -1. Because on this one, it's not going to be, it's going to be 5 and -5. Okay? So our amplitude here is 5. What is our period? And our asymptotes are going to be plus or minus pi over 2 times b, which is 4, so that's plus or minus pi over 8, correct? Is that what you guys got? Any questions? Are we good with this now? Yeah. Okay. Let's look on the back. On the back, I just gave you guys some review problems, cosine, sine, and the tangents, just so you'd have them all there together. We can do those. I wish this were clearer. Oh, there we go. That's really clear, isn't it? Okay. So, cosine, first thing we need to find is what? The amplitude, which is 1, and the period, which is, remember, period is 2 pi over b for cosine. So this would be 2 pi over what? 4, which is just pi over 2. Good. So the next thing we want to see is how many do we need to break this up into? 8? We would say 4 times b, which is 16. Okay? So we know this is 2 pi, and then we just need to divide this up into 16. Okay. This is going to be fun. You ready? Is that 16? Okay. Here we go. Oh, and what do we start with? How do we know what we're counting by? Yes, Naomi. Yes, you may. How do we know what we're counting by? Right. Period divided by 2 pi. And what's our period? Okay. Wait, isn't our period divided by flip 4? So this would be pi over 2 times what? Not 4 over 1, but 1 over 4. So that's pi over 8. right? But what I'm most concerned are the ones that cross the x-axis.
That's
Right. So I guess we would need to start graphing this for us to determine that because it's going to be different for sine and cosine. For cosine, where do we start? At the top, right? So top, and then we go here, right? So this right here is pi over 8. Right? So that would be 2 pi over 8. So this one is 3 pi over 8, 4 pi over 8. So this is 5 pi over 8, 6 pi over 8. This is 7 pi over 8. 9 pi over 8. So this is 10 pi over 8. Wait, 7. That's 9 pi over 8. Sorry. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I would recommend you just list them all on your test just to make sure. Are you with us, Ella? Yes, ma'am. Ella, do you have a question? Okay. So 12, 13. Okay. So we'll start here, and then we go down, middle, up, middle, down, middle, up, middle, down, middle, up, middle, down, middle, up. Okay, so here we go. Okay, any questions? Are we good? Okay, so next one is sine. On sine, what's the amplitude? And the period is 2 pi over b, which would be 2 pi over 1/2. So that's 2 pi times the reciprocal, which is 2 over 1. That's 4 pi. Our period is 4 pi. And remember, b tells us the number of cycles. So how many cycles are we going to have? Just half of 1. So that's a 1/2. We only have half of 1. Over here, our cycle, we had 4 cycles, which means we started here, so we went down and the back up. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 cycles. Do you see that? That's a way you can check your answer too. So we only need a half of a cycle here. This is 1, this is -1. To find out how many pieces we're breaking this up into, it's just 4 times b, which is 1/2, and that's going to give us 2. So we just have 2 equal cycles. I'm sorry, 2 equal segments. To determine what those are, we can just take our period, which is 4 pi, and divide that by 4, right? And that gives us pi, which just means this is pi and this is 2 pi, which makes sense. If we know that we're going from 0 to 2 pi, we just break that in half, so it's pi and 2 pi, right? Now, since this is sine, regardless of if it's positive or negative, we're going to start at our origin, right? But how do we determine where our next point goes? Since this is negative, right? Do some of you kind of want to put a point here, but that doesn't make sense? Where does the point go? Bottom, right here. And then the next point, we go back to the middle. And this is our graph. And I know it looks weird because it's only half of a cycle. If we were to continue this cycle, let me show you this. I guess it's really too close, but it would go like over here, and that would be the rest of the cycle. Do you see that? But this is only, this is only half of our cycle. Only half of the cycle. Any questions here? Okay, do y'all want to do the tangent graphs, or are we good with those? Yeah. All right, so on number 9, our amplitude is what? Amplitude is 3, and the period is, it's not 2 pi over b, but it's just pi over b, right? And what is b? 2. So our period is pi halves. The next thing we need to find for our tangent are what? Our asymptotes. And remember, the asymptotes are just half of the period, or you could say it's 2 pi over b times what? 2? So that would just be 2 pi over 4. Correct. Oh, I'm sorry, this is not 2 pi. It's just pi. So it would just be pi over 4, right? Sorry. You know, I realized I made a mistake when I got the same as the period. Does that make sense? It's just pi over 4. Because let's go back and see, the asymptotes are just pi over 2b, right? I made the mistake of putting 2 pi there. But it's not. It's just pi over x equals plus or minus pi over 2 times b, which is 2. So that's x equals plus or minus pi over 4. Oh, sorry. Do you see? Yes? Ella, are you with me? Okay. So this right here would be, what would this be? What would this be, Ella? Do you have your class? Do you need your glasses on? Any questions there? Okay, the next one's the same way, it just goes the opposite way, right? Are we good with not doing this one? Okay. Now, we've had problems like this on your home or on our notes. We haven't actually assigned them for homework, but I don't think that you're going to struggle too much with them, okay? In order to write the equation of a sine function, we just need to know the fact that y is equal to a times the sine of b theta, right? We already know a. What's a? 8, right? A is 8. So this is y is equal to 8 times the sine, but we need to find b, right? So how could we find b? It is 3, and yes, you're also right. We said our period equal to 2 pi over 3. We know that the period is equal to 2 pi over b, right? And since our period is 2 pi over 3, we can just set that equal to 2 pi over b and then solve for b. But we don't even have to solve here, do we? We can just look at this and see that b would need to be 3 for these two to be equal. So this would be 3 theta. That's your answer. Absolutely. I want to talk about something really fast. So do you see on number 12, I should not have written amplitude is equal to negative 5.7 because the amplitude is always absolute value. I should have just said A is equal to negative 5.7. Okay? So it's just a technical mistake. It shouldn't. I just want you to know the amplitude will never be negative. Okay? So this should just say A is, and this one again should say, any one that says and the amplitude is negative should just say A equals negative 1.
Will it still be the same if like cosine and sine are the same, like how you round it out?
Yes, except for the sine and cosine are the same except for cosine, you know what I mean, for the equation.
Okay, so like I just write it down how we solved it on the last one.
Yes, so you mean like on number 12? We can do number 12.
No, I was just
Oh.
making sure. So
Yeah, number 12 is the same thing. On tangent, you wanted to do tangent though, Anna? Okay, so let's look at number 13. So in order for us to determine the, we already know A is negative 1, but for us to find the B, we need to do the same thing. The difference is that for a tangent function, the period is pi over B, not 2 pi over B, but just regular pi over B, right? But our period here is pi over 2, so that's pi over 2 is equal to pi over B. Right, you could cross multiply, or you could just see that B would have to be 2, right?
none of these really changed, do they?
Um,
It's all the same, right?
what do you mean none of them really change?
Really changed how you work them out, right?
Right.
It's kind of the same.
The only difference is the period is different for the tangent. Yeah. Okay, are we good with that? Or we never finished this one. This would be y is equal to -1 tangent of, what did we find be 2 theta?
Maybe 14,
We can.
because the period's 4 pi. I don't know, let me get it.
Well, the period again is 2 pi over b, right? And if it's 4 pi here, that's 4 pi is equal to 2 pi.
1/2?
Yes, but I want to show people how we got 1/2. How do we solve this now? Is that where we're getting lost? What we can do is we can put a 1 in the denominator, and then we can cross multiply, right? So when we cross multiply, that would give us 4 pi b equals 1 times 2 pi, which is just 2 pi. I'm going to just rewrite that up here. 4 pi b is equal to 2 pi, right? But how do we get b by itself? We would need to divide by what? 4 pi? And then we'll get b is equal to pi over 2. I'm sorry, b is equal to 1 over 2. The pi's would cancel. So our equation is y is equal to 1 times the cosine of 1/2 theta. We can. Are there any are there any questions here? Do we hate the dividing stuff and the fractions? Is that's the okay. All right, on number 16, this is the period is equal to 2 pi over b, correct? So that's pi over 4 is equal to 2 pi over b. And now we just need to cross multiply again. So that's b times pi is b pi or pi b, however you want to write it, is equal to 8 pi. Because we cross multiplied 4 times 2 pi is 8 pi. And then we divided both sides by pi. And we get b is equal to 8. So y is equal to -1 sine of 8 theta. Any questions? All right, for these down here, these graphs, remember to write the equation, we only need to know A and B, right? So on this graph on number 17, what is A? 1. And is this sine or cosine? How do you know it's cosine? Starts at 1. So already we have y is equal to 1 cosine. And then what does b represent? Who remembers what b represents? In 2 pi, right? From 0 to 2 pi. So if we start here, and we're going and going and going and going and going, tell me when to stop. We stopped right there where? Any questions here? All right, on number 18, this is the same thing, right? So this is cosine, but what's our a here? A is 2, so that's y. And is it positive 2 or negative 2? How do we know it's negative 2? It starts at the bottom, and then cosine of, now, what's our, yes?
How do you know if it's cosine or tangent?
Well, tangent is very, very much different, right? Remember, this is what the graph of a tangent looks like. It has 2 asymptotes.
Yeah.
And so the difference between cosine and sine is just whether it starts at 0, 0 or not, okay? So this is 2 times the cosine. Now what's b? B is the number of cycles, right? How many cycles do we have? Let's see. We go, here is, how many is that? And then 2. So it's -2 cosine of 2 theta. Any questions? Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to take out your sine graphs and your cosine graphs and your tangent. Since we went over almost this whole sheet today, I want you guys to finish the rest of those, or at least work on. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, we still have 9 minutes. So, and I want to make sure, you guys told me that you're not so comfortable maybe knowing the formulas, but I think the more problems you work, the more formulas you'll know. Okay? So that's what I want you guys to do now as well as for homework. I do have a study guide for you. I have not made copies of it, but I can make copies of it and you can come get them 5th period. I'll also put a copy of it on Schoology. I haven't keyed it yet, and that's why I haven't made copies. I haven't finished keying the whole thing yet, so. But hopefully I'll have that done by study. Any questions?